Hi, it's Rose Marcus, and thanks for tuning in. Jupiter and Neptune are about to form a grand conjunction in the sign of Pisces. That'll happen on April 12, 2022. And it is the first time that has happened in 166 years. So it's very, very important. It is a transit that corresponds to the bigger picture and also is relevant to your personal journey. So Neptune takes 166 years to go around the sun once, and it has been traveling through the sign of Pisces, its home sign, since 2011. It will continue in its home sign until 2025, 2026. Jupiter is a one-year transit through a sign. It takes 12 years to go around the entire zodiacal wheel or around the sun once. And Jupiter and Neptune conjunctions happen once every 13 years. But when they occur each 13 years, it's in a different sign. 166 years ago, we had a conjunction like we're going to have on April 12. So this hasn't happened for a very long time. None of us on the planet have experienced that. Let me show you. My intention for today is to give something for those who are astrologically versed and those who are not. So come along with me. Here is the chart for the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction on April 12. 7:42 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and you can make an adjustment for wherever you might be. Here is the conjunction right here. Neptune, 23 degrees of Pisces, 58 minutes. Jupiter at 23 degrees Pisces, 58 minutes. So that's a conjunction there. And for students of astrology, just for the sake of simplicity, I like to use a natural chart with a 0 Aries ascendant, because it's an easy visual. It puts all the planets in there, in the signs in the natural houses. So the last Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, as you see the date on the screen, March 17, 1856, and the next conjunction from now, none of us will be on the planet then either, or I don't know, maybe science will make us live that long, May 10, 2188. So these transits are exceptionally rare. And what I say about that is, of course, any planet in its home sign, Neptune is in its home sign or its domicile, Pisces. So it's going to be of a stronger influence. And Jupiter in ancient times was considered the ruler of Pisces. And that was before the discovery of the telescope and our ability to map more of the solar system. And so it has a great affinity with the sign of Pisces. And some astrologers still consider that Jupiter is a ruler or co-ruler of that sign. And so this is very momentum. I consider it a high tide or a high watermark year. And certainly we can see that there's some really important things going on the planet. So I'm recording this on April 1st, and this is before the conjunction happens. And from now until April 12, Jupiter is completing on Neptune. It is finishing off a cycle. And you may have that sense of it's time to make change, or it's time to let go, or it's time to dissolve something. You may be feeling that that things are just kind of, the life force of something is just draining out. And if you are feeling that way, then you are picking up the influence of this transit. Now, Pisces is an archetype of attunement. It's like a tuning fork. And Neptune in Pisces rules the collective unconscious. And so when Neptune is in Pisces, we're tuning in, and we tune in globally. It's a mass consciousness thing. We're all kind of tuned into the same vibrations, the same energy fields. Jupiter is the planet of increase or expansion. So the Jupiter with Neptune increases or expands that attunement, it makes for great sensitivity. You feel something. You're picking up the energy. You're picking up the vibrations. You're picking up the sound waves of the collective. And certainly, it isn't difficult to tune in nowadays when we see what is going on. Just tune on to the we've got everything that's on the news is, of course, something that we are carrying with us. We've been dealing with the pandemic, COVID pandemic, for a few years. And this has been just an absolute shock for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, right? And so we can see, that what affects the one affects the all. And that is certainly so for climate change and global warming, and the ills that we see on the planet, for sure. Now, it's interesting to note with this conjunction, it's a high tide year. Pisces, when Pisces energy is animated, or when it's on the increase like this is, there's a great deal of unknown. Pisces is nebulous. It's the fog. It's infinite. Whenever we have a Pisces influence, we just can't see. So we may not be able to see what's on the road ahead. But Jupiter is one of the planets that I correspond to the future. And so to say that that Jupiter Neptune is stirring the ocean's tides, it's stirring the collective energy here, and we're all tuning in. Pisces, there's a few things to say about the Pisces archetype. It is the archetype of potential. And with Jupiter coming, full circle on that Neptune, and then going into a new phase, starting a new phase on April 12th, what is happening is that it is a completion and seeding time for the future, for down the road a ways. And there is a subtle shift that can be seismic, absolutely seismic. That can be a subtle shift of your own consciousness, your own intention setting. And it can be just a subtle shift in terms of how how circumstances are playing out. I think about a ship, or direction. If you have that, you have the ship, and you have it on its track, and the compass is just a smidgen out. By the time it gets further out, it is way off track, right? So just a subtle move can get you going in a whole different direction. And perhaps that's what we really need right now, is to get going in that whole another direction. All right. Pisces is also the archetype of relinquish, surrender, and transcend. And we must relinquish and surrender our addictions, our addiction to oil. That is a Pisces archetype. Our addiction to turning a blind eye to the sufferings of the world, to the marginalized, and to the sick, the elderly, the displaced, every step of the way. And we must not turn a blind eye to climate change, and we must put more investment into climate change initiatives. So there's so much going on. When you look at this transit, for those who are astrologically versed, notice that everything is sitting on one side of the chart. All of the planets are on their waxing half of the cycle in relationship to planet Pluto. And Pluto is sitting here in the sign of Capricorn. It's at 28 degrees, and there are only 30 degrees in a sign. So next year, Pluto is going to, end of March of 2023, it's going to dip into Aquarius for the first time. And it will be back and forth until November of 2024, when Pluto will move into Aquarius and stay there for the next 20 years to 2044. Pluto comes around the zodiacal wheel once every 248 years, and that represents a collective era. Capricorn is the archetype of reality and time. And when Pluto comes to Capricorn, big picture soul, collective soul, and your personal journey, I say that Pluto swings its wrecking ball on any structure, system, consciousness, or reality that has outworn its time has come. Capricorn rules the structure of anything. It's, our governing bodies. It's everything to do with how reality is going right now. And we're coming to the end of the road of that exact transit. It moved into Capricorn in 2008. And as I said, we'll leave next year. And additionally, looking at this Jupiter-Neptune transit here, again, we're on this finishing track until April 12th. And on that completion and on that ending track, there's seeding for down the road, maybe 3 to 5 years from now. And also, too, we're going to move into things firing up in some kind of new way. And then there's a lot of experimentation we have to do and figuring out the lay of the land. Notice that Jupiter, sorry, I meant to say Venus is in the sign of Pisces, and it will soon come and conjunct these planets. I'll talk about that in just a moment. We also have Mars. Venus and Mars are the relationship duo, and they are in a finishing path here. Mars is going to move into Pisces very soon, in the month of April. And it is going to come up and trigger this Neptune-Jupiter conjunction. So if you have any planets, if you know your natal chart and you have any mutable planets at 23 degrees, or say from 20 to 25 degrees of the mutable signs, which are Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius, then you're going to be picking up the energy of this momentum transit. All right. And that's not all who's affected by this. We all are at some level. And let me move to the next chart just to show you this one. For those who are astrologically versed, I won't spend too much time on this, but these are planetary nodes on the outer rim here, which just punches up the importance of this Jupiter-Neptune transit, as you see right there. And important to note that in natal astrology, we use the nodes of the moon, and they're relevant to past lifetime dynamics that we bring into this subconscious tracks and intention for your evolutionary forward. And they're different for all of us. The planetary nodes run on an 18-month cycle, and that's where eclipses happen along. So they're very important to watch. In January, the transit nodes moved into Scorpio and Taurus. Here they are right here. South node in Scorpio, north node in Taurus. That's the survival axis. And of course, shortly after that, Russia invaded Ukraine, and we still have COVID going on. So we have an intensity dial-up with the transiting nodes of the moon over the next 18 months. But these are the planetary nodes. All of the planets have those nodes. And in particular, note that the south node of Venus is sitting here at 7 degrees Pisces, right on the Venus transit, planet Venus at 7 degrees Pisces. And the north node is sitting at 14 degrees of Taurus, and Uranus is about to cross that as well too. So that punches up the information of Venus. Now Venus, for astrologers, again, I'll just go back to this chart for just a moment. Venus is what we call the lower octave of a higher octave planet, and that's Neptune. Venus has everything to do with what has value and meaning. In the lower octave, it's to do with survival. In the higher octave, Neptune, it has to do with ultimate value and meaning, our ultimate path of service. And certainly, all of us that are, alive today have chosen to be here at this particular moment in time to serve the collective. And we serve the collective in terms of personal and private life journeys. And then we serve it in terms of, our tribe, our group, our community. There are times when whole groups of people, will be affected by natural disasters, by earthquakes, by fires, and then by man-made, by wars, and so on. And that represents a whole, mass of people, or a whole, large grouping of people. And they and they're also serving to demonstrate to the collective, again, the necessity for us to remember what we have forgotten. What we have forgotten, I think, is, putting our compassion and reverence for all of life first. So we've forgotten our humanity in a lot of cases. I mean, some of us are brilliant at living our lives and standing present for self and for others, but certainly we can use a lot more iconic people and a lot more leadership in that way. All right. I shall move on. So what I want to show you now, or well, let me look at this, talk about this slide for just a moment. And of course, you can stop the video and take a look at this in greater detail if you like. But here on the screen, I have the Jupiter-Neptune glyphs, and just talking about the kind of themes that run through all of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions. They're different every time. There's a little this or a little that, but basically you put the two together, and Jupiter is a planet of increase and Neptune is infinite. So you put the two of those, Neptune is boundless. So you have a lot of something going on. And first of all, massive loss through the unforeseen, that is a signature of Jupiter and Neptune. We certainly are seeing massive loss of permafrost and, you know, all kinds of things, and massive loss through the unforeseen. My heart just breaks for the people of Ukraine. Pandemics and floods are a signature of this. Neptune rules the immune system, and it also rules exposure. And so we have the human organism, and Jupiter rules nature and natural law. It is an invasion archetype. So when Jupiter and Neptune are together in this way, we can see pandemics and of course floods, you know, that's high tides, you know, more water, you know, more natural disasters, the inception of a large scale long range migrations of people, cultures, ideologies, population growth, population displacement, you know, and both Jupiter and Neptune rule freedom. And when we see this transit, it's about emancipation bids and the losses of rights and freedoms and cultural traditions. And I think of Afghan women now who are not allowed to study or learn, and certainly education falls under a Jupiter archetype, right? You know, higher mind things. Infiltration, invasion of lands, of privacy, collective persecution, spiritual quests, and religious formations, and maybe you know, crusades, you know, self-appointed God missions, which may be a part of Putin's plan to reestablish the illustrious Roman, I meant to say Russian Empire. New frontiers. Jupiter is an exploration archetype, so exploration of the uncharted, land, space, consciousness. Iconic is a word that I use for Neptune. We have iconic discoveries, inventions, and events, mass everything, mass production. And as you see on the screen here, Neptune rules oil and water, and certainly clean drinking water is an issue for many people the world over. Advances in healthcare and social services, influential people, iconic people doing important things, philanthropic enterprises, and the flourishing of creativity, art, music, and culture. And Jupiter is a broadcast archetype. Neptune's about tuning in, but we also see advances in broadcasting, publishing, marketing, and some aviation or, you know, air travel. So I have this big you know, a lot of information on the screen right here, and students of astrology will find this fascinating. And if you don't know the astrology, just look at the dates, right? So what I've got on the screen here is one complete cycle of Jupiter Neptune, starting with the March 17, 1856 transit. And what I've got are the quarter turns, so the four mutable conjunctions. So June 1 of 1894 was in the sign of Gemini. September 18, 1932 is in the sign of Virgo. And a triple conjunction, January 31st, May 21st, and September 15 of 1971 in the sign of Sagittarius. Let me say one thing before I get into all of that. Neptune was the first planet to be discovered via mathematical calculations. Astronomers were noticing that there was perturbances with planet Uranus, and they found it mathematically before they saw it. And it was discovered in 1856, 10 years before this March 17, 1856 cycle started. And in 2011, Neptune completed one entire journey around the zodiacal wheel since its discovery. I thought that that was a fascinating tidbit of information for you. So the threads that continue through 1856, yellow fever and cholera pandemics, right? Fascinating. Here we have the Treaty of Paris ends the Crimean War, 1853 to 1956. I meant to say this earlier. On April 12, there may or may not be an event that we can correlate to on that date, that we can correlate to the Neptune-Jupiter transit. But I see this transit as extending over the entire year. So you can watch to see if there is something that goes on in the world or in your personal life. But if it doesn't, know that that everything is in play and has been in play and is continuing to evolve, perhaps unseen. Again, Pisces is about potentials that are stirring and getting ready for their time is right moment. All right. And pandemics last a batch of years, right? As you can see with cholera there. Religion is another Pisces archetype, and we have Mormon Reformation and Massachusetts making Christmas a legal holiday. There's little tidbits just that demonstrate the flavor of these conjunctions here. Florence Nightingale is credited with being the founder of modern nursing, and eventually led to the Red Cross. And that fits under the Pisces archetype, service to the whole, right? Nursing and hospitalization, that's a Pisces archetype too. And Sir Henry Bessemer invented mass production of inexpensive steel. And why that was so important is because it changed the whole building industry and allowed for the building of tall buildings. So, a real important invention during that time. And let me just say 1856 in 1860, in 1856, in terms of a high water mark, timetable, it was at the height of slavery, right? And there was great, kind of division in the US between the North and the South. Lincoln was elected president in 1960, and the Civil War started shortly after that. So we see that, something was in the works regarding, denigration of sectors of the population and emancipation bids, right? We see that going on. 1884, the Hong Kong plague experienced its harshest year, and that continued all the way to 1925. There was a huge oil discovery, a couple of huge oil discoveries in the USA. Louis Pasteur invents the rabies vaccine. So again, protection of the immune system, right? Another, thing from the religion end of things, the American Catholic Church was formed, and a couple of iconic brands. Coca-Cola was first bottled, and the Hershey's chocolate factory opened, so, appealing to the senses is also a Pisces, sweet escapes. Okay. All right. 1932, Great Depression. And again, each one of these dates here are picking up these four angles, an influence with the 1932 in Virgo. It's about lack, it's about poverty. And it's also picking up the collective loss of faith and hope. And that's Pisces and Sagittarius, right? So we can see how these are major high watermark years in terms of what we're experiencing on the planet. Toxins and vaccines were in major production at that time. And again, a couple of iconic headlines, Amelia Earhart in her solo Atlantic crossing and disappearance, of course, Pisces, and the Lindbergh kidnapping, Lindbergh baby kidnapping. Also at this time, BBC had its first TV broadcast, 1932, long time ago. Gandhi staged a hunger strike. Ethiopia ends slavery, and Iraq was set free of British rule. And that's interesting because monarchy is a Sagittarius archetype. And so we see with the next statement as well too, more dissolution, dissolving of the monarchy, like we have today with Jamaica and the Bahamas, wanting to break free of British rule, right? So again, repetitions, you see a similarity. Historians look back, astrologers look back as well too. 1971, the Pentagon Papers were leaked re-Vietnam. And so again, collective disillusionment, right? Violation of trust. The Aswan Dam was built in Egypt, and Disney World opens, and Pisces is the imaginative realm, and so again, how appropriate, world of magic, the magic of Disney. And again, in terms of travel to explore new frontiers, the Apollo mission and Soviet space station, just amazing that and of course we're continuing that now. The NASDAQ opened, and that's 1971. Sagittarius rules speculative things as well too, so stock market fits very well with the opening of NASDAQ. In Bangladesh and Himalayas, there was extreme weather, massive flooding, melting snow, heavy rains, it's all the water element. Sagittarius's increase again. Qatar free of British rule. And some iconic deaths: Jim Morrison, Louis Armstrong, Dwayne Allman. All right. Let me go to the next screen. So before that, that batch, we had on January 9, 1997, a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, as you see on the screen there, 2708 degrees of Capricorn. And here it is right up here on the screen for you to have a look at. And what was going on in 1997? Again, another pandemic, the avian bird flu pandemic. The Asian financial crises, again, some loss connected with that. The first successful cloning, Dolly the sheep, man plays God, right? And the first, another first here, for space, Mars Pathfinder lands on Mars, right? Amazing. At that time, the Saturn position was in the sign of Aries, and one half of the nodal axis was also in Aries at that time. So new frontiers. Also too, so a couple of iconic things here. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is published, and the Titanic is released, and also a couple of iconic deaths. Diana, August 31st, and Mother Teresa, September 5th. Mother Teresa's death was quite overshadowed by the outpouring of emotion over Diana's death, for sure. And the last triple conjunction that happened was in 2009. This is the last conjunction before this one, at between 24 and 26 degrees of Aquarius. There are the dates on the screen: May 10, July 10, and December 21st. So again, what do we have? Pandemic and natural disaster, right? We have H1N1, the swine flu. We have a China earthquake that displaces nearly 500,000 people. We also have North Korea breaks the nuclear treaty, and they've been going hot ever since. It was Obama's first year in office, so that was a groundbreaking for a Black man to become president of the United States. Remember that last cycle was at the height of slavery in the US, right? it was a global financial crisis of epic proportions, and the auto industry and Wall Street bailouts here. GM emerged in that year from bankruptcy protection. This is a little tidbit here. Russians' digital sky buys into Facebook. I just thought that that was interesting. It didn't, it's only had 2%, or that's what I read there. But it allows for Facebook, for Russia to infiltrate Facebook. Mexico legalizes same-sex marriage and LGBT adoption, so yay for that. And a discovery first here of great importance, looking back, Israeli archaeologists discover remnants of a dwelling in Nazareth dating back to the lifetime of Jesus. So that's pretty amazing there for that, Pisces, the sign of the fish, Christianity, right? Okay. Long-standing Sri Lankan civil war ends, and here's another water element here, this discovery of a first exoplanet on which water could exist. And the death of Michael Jackson and what happened, accidental death through drug overdose, and addictions are a Pisces archetype as well too. And I don't have this slide for this, but I wanted to make mention. Let me just find my note. Where is it here? Oh yeah. Goodness, where is it? The last triple conjunction. So we had a triple conjunction. Let me just put this pause here. Oh gosh, I can't find it. I just have to talk about it. So the last triple conjunction was 2009. The one before that was 1971, and the one before that was 1919 and 1920. What happened then? What happened then was it was the end of World War I, and the men were returning home from war, right? And the Treaty of Versailles was signed. The very flawed Treaty of Versailles was signed, and that was really very displeasing to China and Japan. It kind of, was it kind of divided the East and West, and the ill will that all caused, kept it festering until World War II and Hitler's rise and all that kind of stuff happened. So that was an interesting thing with the 1919-1920 date. But also at that point, the end of World War I, it was the kind of inception, that transit for the beginning of the USA to step onto the world stage as a lead superpower nation, right? And so this is now about 100 years later from that. I think that that's just absolutely fascinating. It was at that time that the USA started to become a front runner, and that transit was in the sign of Leo as well too. So shifting the balance of power there. All right, so fascinating on that. Jupiter and Neptune, they are ruling the cultural ideals of an era, and the breakdown of cultural models that no longer serve, right? Let me go to here. Oh yeah, the next, I'm just putting this on the screen for those who want to think about it. The next Jupiter-Neptune synod, March 24, 2035, and there it is sitting there at 21 degrees of Aries. Alrighty. All right, and let me just mention, as I said before, Jupiter is a fast mover around the sun, and in 2022, it moved into Pisces in December of 2021, as you see the dates on the screen here, and will continue in Pisces until May 10 of 2022. From May 10 to October 27, it'll back into Aries and finish out the year in Pisces. But when it comes back to Pisces in the fall, it's not going to come back to that 23 degrees. It just comes back to 28, just, a couple of degrees into Pisces before it leaves. You can see the retrograde dates on the screen here for you. And at the end of September, Jupiter in its retrograde motion will be opposed to the Sun at the end of September. If you have anything at 3 degrees of the cardinal signs, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, that can be a catapulting moment for you, perhaps. All right. And Neptune in Pisces, as you see on the screen here, the dates April 4, 2011 to January 26 of 2026, with a back and forth in 2025. And Neptune will take a retrograde at the end of June to the beginning of December. And it will only go back to 25 degrees. But as I said, I do look at this Jupiter-Neptune transit as being influential all year and triggered all year. And here is on the screen, you see Mars in Gemini. Mars is usually a 5 to 6 week transit through a sign. And when it moves into Gemini in August, it is going to stay all the way through until March of 2023. That's a really, really long transit for Mars because it is taking a retrograde, as you can see on the screen there, October 31st to January 12, 2023. So Mars is a trigger influence, so it fires things up. And Mars, as you can see on the screen here, I put these arrows here. Here's the Neptune transit, and here is Mars at 23 degrees. Mars in Gemini is going to square that Neptune in October, in November, and lastly in March. So Mars in Gemini, Gemini rules a lot of different things, but in terms of what that's going to do for you is, Mars is mobilizing wherever it goes. Now it's going to be in Aries in the month of April, May, somewhere in there. And it's going to fire things up, and Jupiter is going to be in Aries as well too. But once it gets to Gemini, this is diversifying, and it's more avenues, and it's more things opening up, and one thing leading to another, or multiples or multi-level going on at the same time. And as Mars turns retrograde, it is a time to question the direction, or to check in again to see. What I suggest is that this is a year to try it on for size, to explore, and to be open to changing as the moment dictates. Because certainly when Mars is retrograde, you might not want to go in the direction that you thought you were going in. Or if you've made the plan, you get the chance to work the kinks out of the system before you get to go, and that will be after Mars finishes the retrograde in the beginning of January. So essentially, what is taking place, that whatever this Jupiter-Neptune transit is about, we're going to have a full year of processing it, of uncovering it, of it exposing whatever it is going to expose. And of course, Gemini rules your neighbors, your friends, your siblings, study, education track, schooling, and again, we have the person-to-person transmission stuff. So I recommend that you continue to protect your immune system. Don't let up on that, because I think that this is a signature for yet another wave of the pandemic, at whatever kind of variant or whatever kind of variants are a Gemini archetype. So we can expect more ahead with this transit. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some charts of events, right? Important things. And the first one is coronavirus. All right, so the inner wheel here, and this is for astrologers, but again, as I say, if you're not an astrology student, I still have things that may pique your interest. So the inner wheel here is the birth chart for the coronavirus, which is accepted at December 30th, or commonly, considered to be December 30th, 2019, 5:43 p.m. in Wuhan. And, we can never really know for sure, the exactness on these transits, but the outer wheel is the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, and it's sitting up here at 23 degrees. So they are both approaching this line, which is the midheaven, and crossing that line is important. Now, Neptune is going to take a while to get there. As I said, it doesn't leave Pisces until 2025, 2026. So that's a couple of years. Jupiter will do that back and forth this year. And so we'll see once it crosses, while we've got it in the 9th house of the chart, that is the house of increase. And once it goes into the 10th house, it can reduce or, kind of pull it back, okay, which I would hope. Mind you, it can just go to a new reality level. It might do that. So check that out. Watch that. That kind of influence. Anyway, this suggests to me that there's still further to go with the pandemic. This is for those who want to look at the planetary nodes. At the time of the coronavirus, Neptune was in square to the nodes of Uranus, which brings in the public exposure, and how that became a global phenomena. And both Pluto and Saturn are sitting here. Saturn is culminating on Pluto, and both of these are aspecting the south nodes of Saturn, Pluto, which makes that a really important event for the collective in terms of shifting of our collective reality. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on it for the sake of those who are not astrologically versed. Ukraine and the invasion of Ukraine on February 24th at 4:55 a.m. And so I put the significant transits here on the chart for you to take a look at. But certainly the Neptune-Jupiter transit was take them by stealth, even though you see this grouping right here, that this is the 12th house of the chart, which is natural house of Pisces, which is behind the scenes. The chart, it has Capricorn energies here, but if you remember in February, Venus and Mars were toggling, and they were toggling along like this, and it was kind of like Putin was getting the tanks lined up, and it still was a surprise when it happened, right? So there's that. And Moon was in the sign of Sagittarius, which is an invasion archetype. So I won't go into too much of the detail with the astrology of that, just for the sake of trying to minimize on the amount of time that this watch time here. But there are some transits that I pulled out as being significant. Certainly we can see that that Putin is hunkering down, so I don't think he has any intention to be finishing anytime soon, right? And here is, we watch the eclipses of the year. So just after the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction on April 12, there will be a partial solar eclipse on April 30th, right? So solar eclipses are new moons, and they are accelerators. Eclipses are accelerators. So they accelerate a new chapter starting, and this is, just after that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. The inner wheel is the Ukraine, the middle wheel is the invasion, and the outer wheel are the transits. And for the eclipse, it's at 10 degrees Taurus. So if it's your birthday, if you are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, and born kind of, at the at that around that 10 degrees, 10 to 14 degrees, then this can be a major influence for you. And Taurus, of course, has to do with survival. It has to do with money, and survival at all levels. Can I survive this? Can I survive my job, my relationship, this pressure, this health challenge, this financial, whatever. So it's got, many different statements there. On the Ukraine chart, that 10 degrees is favorable to planet Uranus. So I would hope that there would be some good advances for them. Certainly, you know, they're fighting for their survival, right? And on this eclipse, Venus and Jupiter will be together as well too. So Venus will have already passed Neptune and on its way to Jupiter. So whatever is here, there's Venus and Jupiter can be great opportunity or great loss. You know, either when the fish swim in two directions, right? You know, so it can be wonderful for creative enterprise, for romance as well too. All right, and here is let's see, the Ukraine chart with the lunar eclipse, and both lunar eclipses of the year are totals. And I just have to move something out of the way. So we've got May 16 and November 8. The total lunar eclipse on May 16 is 25 degrees of Scorpio Taurus. So if you have again planets, and again here we go with Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius in the late degrees, then this eclipse is going to be catapulting for you. And Saturn is in dynamic tension to all four eclipses of the year. So Saturn has to do with the reality and about the structure in the sign of Aquarius. It is accelerating a complete reinvention. It has to do with your relationship to external authority, how you authenticate your own needs. It's about you taking control and the need to take control in some kind of new way. All right. And on November 8, the eclipse is involving the solar eclipse at 16 degrees of the fixed signs, and the moon is with Uranus, which of course is something quite extreme or unexpected, and again catapulting. It is you know, a breakdown or a breakthrough of some kind. And the eclipse sun is with Mercury. So Mercury is 15 and the sun is 16. So again, that is a key person, key circumstance, key event. In the fall, Saturn and Uranus will come back to be in aspect with one another like they were all year, all in 2021. That was the traveling with the brakes on influence. This is a finish off of that from about the end of August through the end of November into December, and then they start to release the stronghold that they have on each other. Okay, and these are charts that I will just leave for astrologers to look at. Vladimir Putin's chart with the May 16 eclipses. The eclipses are hard on his chart. And Vladimir Zelensky's chart here. And notice that the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is up in the 10th house, which is fame generating, by the way. And certainly we didn't know who he was before this. Many of us didn't, sorry, before this this tragic event has happened. And so he has really been an incredible social role model and leader, and an inspiration to his people and to the world over, really, for his incredible presence for Ukraine, yeah, for serving his people, serving the collective. All right, NATO. NATO is pretty important here, and here is that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in square to NATO's moon and Uranus. So this aspect right here is what we call crises in consciousness, and certainly there's quite a dilemma here in how to you know, how to navigate and the decisions that are made, and what the repercussions of those decisions can be. Biden said quite recently that NATO has never been more at one, and that's a Neptune Pisces archetype as well too. Here is the USA with the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, and I'm using the 2:13 a.m. birth time, but there are many birth charts for the USA, and you're welcome to use whatever you like. Here is the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. It is in the 11th house, which is the house of the global community. And certainly the USA is influential regarding the global community. It is experiencing the Neptune opposition. So again, it's a very tricky point for the USA. But certainly so far, so good, I think. There's enormous pressure on the government and the president. That's at Saturn right here, which is involved in all of the eclipses and so forth of the year. And for the USA, it's a feature year for the USA because the USA is experiencing their Pluto return, which many astrologers have been talking about. And here is, sorry, before I get to that, here's the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the middle wheel, 23 degrees, with the total lunar eclipse that's coming up in May. And the reason I put this up is because the total lunar eclipse on May 16, Mars position is 23 degrees Pisces, which is a trigger for the April 12th Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. So, if nothing happens around the 12th of April, I might suggest that when this eclipse happens, the US is going to have to take some kind of action, or is taking some kind of action. And that might not only be for the situation in Ukraine, but also what goes on for the American populace. And by the way, Jupiter and Neptune, the USA has said that they're going to take in a lot of Ukrainian refugees, and that Jupiter Neptune speaks to that. Jupiter Neptune is large groups of displaced people, refugees, immigrants, and so forth, right? So we see how that is effective there. And here is the transit triple pass of the Pluto, USA Pluto return for 2022. The dates February 20th, 2022, July 11, 2022, and December 28th. Those are 3 exact hits of Pluto on the transit Pluto on the natal Pluto. And look at this date here, February 20th of 2022. It was 4 days later that Russia invaded Ukraine. So kind of catapulted the USA into its Pluto return, I think. It goes over the whole year. So very interesting on that event. And the last one on December 28, just wanting to point out, if you're using the Gemini rising ascendant, that Mars will be crossing over that ascendant. And when it does so, it is going to conjunct Uranus. And during its before it turns retrograde, during retrograde, and after retrograde, it is going to aspect this Mars. So there's a lot of action for the USA, from August forward through that Mars transit. You're going to see a lot happening for that country. And here is the November 8 eclipse. And the November 8 final eclipse of the year, which is a total lunar eclipse, happens on the USA midterm election. So again, Uranus on that moon can create chaos and volatility. And we've got Mercury there, key person, key circumstance, key event. I will leave this, again, I'm not going to go into great detail about the astrology of it. And for Canadians out there, because I'm Canadian, here's Canada's chart with the November 8 total lunar eclipse. I just put this one up because of it being a little bit more dynamic visually, but the eclipse at 16 degrees, the moon at 16 degrees Taurus, Canada's Pluto is 15 Taurus, almost 16 Taurus. And so the eclipse is right across its Pluto and Saturn opposition here. And Taurus Scorpio deals with resources and finances, right? Again, survival things. It's got to do with, with deficits and taxes and finances and investments and resources and mining of resources, right? All right, so here on the screen are some keywords for you in terms of Neptune Pisces archetype and the Jupiter Sagittarius archetype. Neptune is a search for ultimate purpose, value, and meaning, a search for one's ultimate vocation or path of service, the search for the ultimate other, which we tend to look for the soulmate, but really a search for the ultimate other is the divine, it's God, right? Spiritualization of consciousness. The Pisces archetype, I think I said this earlier, the individuated unconscious, that collective attunement, right? So mass consciousness tuning into the same thing. And what we're all tuning into is that we really have to represent much better than we have, union of all diversity, hope, faith, ideals, idealism. It's, salvation. It's a search for ultimate salvation, really, in this. And we look for, those special people to lead us forward. And of course, loss, disillusionment, search for ultimate salvation. That's what I was trying to say a moment ago here. Illusions, delusions, escapism, addiction. The point is, with Pisces, we're so tuned into Ukraine, but we have tragedy going on the world over. And what about the Rohingya? And what about Africa? And what about the those who are experiencing homelessness or addiction, the opioid crises, and so on. There's a lot of other big stories that are not getting the attention because the world is overtaken with Putin and Russia and Ukraine, right? So there's a lot more, from every angle. It's all of it, right? All of it. And it is about exposure and revelation. So again, as we move through this, it's like Pisces is like traveling in the car with the headlights on, and you can only see just barely in front of them. And you have to know that there's no ability to control what happens next. And so you have to align with it instead, right? And so, go with the flow, and as you are able to see your way clear, then take steps forward. And for the entirety of this year, it is take a little step forward, take a pause, see what it does for you, then take another step forward or take a step back, right? So go bit by bit by bit, non-attachment to outcome. That's a Pisces archetype. See what happens when you pause, when you stop, when you're still for a moment, right? So that's at the moment when you can have the greatest downloads or the greatest clarity. Right, Jupiter in Sagittarius is the growth principle. It's the broadening the scope. It is moving beyond, and it really can produce a sense of alienation from wherever you have come from, right? So in terms of broadening the scale, if you have a choice to make about whether to go back or go forward, I mean, in terms of the experimental, it's back and forth is going to get you there, but in terms of that, it's kind of like aim for the long range and then work on the immediate, like what we say, like think global, act local, so think about what you would ultimately like to see and envision it, because if you can't envision it, it may never come to pass, right? So for, as best you can, allow yourself to dream. Pisces is the archetype of dreams, and it is through dreams you can get a lot of information, or you can process and clear out a lot of unresolved emotions. So allow yourself to do that as well too. But it is in the quiet moments that you can find your way. Jupiter is an archetype of optimism and confidence. And so we have to find that someplace. We have to regain our faith and so forth. So it's all about our beliefs. Beliefs create reality. And again, as I say, if you can envision it, you can create it. And that all takes some time, right? We always say to the greater good of all. And, I wanted to say that I was so impressed, and I want to maybe give you this idea. It was like a little Ukrainian girl in the bomb shelter that was singing her heart out, that song from Frozen from Disney. And what happened to her? I mean, she piqued all of her interest. And the next thing you know, this 7-year-old is on stage singing the Ukrainian national anthem, to a whole theater full of people, right? And you kind of wonder, like that, that's it. When you come from out of nothing comes something, and that's the whole creative process. Even when you think you have nothing to give, or that you have nothing going for you, you're going to find, if you will, pull yourself away from those kinds of thoughts, something will happen, something will download, and it will be a seed, and that seed will grow. So allow it to, look for it, and when you can't come up with anything, just carry on with what you're doing. Try to pull away from the anxiety, because anxiety is like having the radio off dial, right? Okay. And Pisces and Neptune, as I said, it rules the immune system, so it needs protecting. It rules the pineal gland, so dream, aspire, and so forth. Okay. All right, so I'm done, and I want to thank you for tuning in today, and I will see you next time. All right.